we have learned a lot by studying the joints and the ligaments and the pathways of those muscles. I'm not trying to take away everything that we have learned. However, it is this kind of separate industrial way of thinking about the body as a set of levers. And the body doesn't develop that way, and it doesn't work that way. You don't use muscles isolatedly, even the biceps curls. It's designed to isolate the biceps. It doesn't isolate the biceps at all. The biceps is connected to the pectoralis minor here. Biceps is connected down through to your thumb here.
And it looks like it's good weather over there. Where are you right now?
I'm in Maine, which is the very northeast part of the U.S.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. Yeah.
So how are we doing here? That looks a little... I have not been able to shave because I ran into a wall last week. I don't know if I was on my boat and I reached something and I went bam on the side of my face. So I don't look that great, but I feel fine.
Yeah, okay.
You look good. No worries.
And you okay?
Yeah. I had somebody work on my sphenoid so that I'm not
no injuries.
Gonna go crazy or something like that.
Okay, good.
So tell me about what you'd like to get out of this.
Yeah, we could just start it.
What we'd like to get out of this, we want to know everything there is about fascia, basically, because you are the king of fascia.
Oh, king, that's good. I went from fascia guy to father of fascia to grandfather of fascia. Now I think I'm
Yeah.
Fascia king. I'll take fascia king.
Let's just call you the godfather of fascia then.
Okay, then we'll hold it a godfather. That's fine.
No, really, you have been a major influence for me personally. So this is a huge episode for me to record, and I'm looking forward to speak to you finally, because I wrote your book, or I read your book back in 2020. The fourth edition of Anatomy Trains, I guess, was published there, right?
Yeah.
And I'm a physical therapist, a physical trainer. So I've always been in this field, but from the day that I read your book was a complete turnaround in my life and my practice in the understanding of the human body. And I guess the biggest point was this fact that we have something called fascia that is basically enclosing and determining all its internal parts, if you can say it like that. And also the realization that fascia is not just a unity, as you described, but also a connection of, what can you say, tracks and stations, basically, right?
Yeah. Well, it's the net in which every physiological activity takes place.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, yeah.
So the fascial net is really, really thin in the breast and in glands because those are fluid, like the pancreas. You can barely get the fascia of the pancreas when you hold it because it's so thin. Why?
Okay.
Because lots of fluid is flowing through it. You don't want lots of fluid flowing through your Achilles tendon. That's wrapped really tightly. So any injury to your Achilles tendon is really, really difficult to heal because the environment, the fascial environment, is wrapped really tightly and won't allow the circulation of fluids. But you find your thyroid gland or the pituitary gland or the pancreas, which is essentially a gland. Those are all going to be, the fascia is like, I don't know, the flimsiest cobweb that you could think of.
Yeah.
But if we can break, because I'm not as much into
I think maybe before we get deeply into the fascial component, maybe we should start telling the audience let Tom tell the audience, who are you, what is your history, what was your discoveries and all that stuff.
Sure. Any way you want to go about it is fine with me.
Yeah, sure.
Well, you can just go ahead. Let us know. I think we already started recording and everything, so
yeah, we're good to go.
Okay. I grew up here in Maine and New England in the United States. Very conservative background. And in the 1970s, the United States was tipped and everything that was loose started rolling towards California. And I was loose and I started rolling towards California. And I got as far, this is 1972, 73. I got as far as Colorado, and to cut long story short, got into this whole field of meditation, martial arts, psychological processing, like Gestalt therapy. And one of the things that was on the circuit then that you had to go do if you were into this thing was to go get Rolfed, which was Ida Rolf, who was actually American, of German descent, but American. And she had this way of working with something she called the fascia. And this was well before the days of the internet, so you had to go somewhere and see somebody. So I went down and she was giving a lecture in downtown LA, which was where I was at the time. And so I got into my car with a friend of mine who also wanted to hear her. And we went down to hear her. And she gave a lecture. And it was a very nice lecture. I was impressed with the lecture, but not bowled over. But then she chose, or he volunteered, the friend that I drove down with to be a model for her. And he was one of those people that I'm sorry, I don't mean to be that unbuttoned. He's one of these people who looks so thin from the side. His chest was right against his spine. Looks kind of normal from the front, but he was really flat. And you've probably seen people like this. And in 45 minutes of what looked like pretty painful prodding, when he stood up, his breath was deeper, his chest was deeper, his voice was deeper, and his emotional affect. I knew him. We drove down together. We were friends. And his emotional affect was changed for a couple of weeks by this thing.
Wow.
And I thought, that is interesting magic. I'd like to know how to do that. And I had no background in this whatsoever. I was an English literature major in college. So it took me several years to get the anatomy and physiology. I should have gone to physiotherapy school, but I didn't. I just became a massage therapist, and I'm still, lo these many years later, still working as a massage therapist.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the whole background of how you got into this. And that's also super interesting. Is that really related? Because I can see that too. When you walk around on the street, you have people that have similar ways of having a bad posture, or you see, like you said, just that the people that are walking like this, or the people that have different postures, all of that is related to fascia?
Fascia is a component of that. Mostly in the physiotherapy realm and the psychological realm, they would say that's your neuromuscular pattern.
Yeah.
You got a brain up here, and there are only two ways out of your brain. One is to glands, and the other is to muscles. You've got everything that comes out of your brain is a motor nerve. It either goes to the smooth muscle in the gland and makes that gland squirt, or it goes to a smooth muscle or a striated muscle. That's all you got. That's the only way out of our brains. And our brains are not very... I like my brain. I don't mean to put it down, but they export a lot of charge into the muscles. And if you're frightened, that's really clear what the export is. Fight or flight or freeze. We've talked about things like that. In the society, but you're constantly outputting what you need for your posture, what you need to shift your eyes for whatever your attention is going to. There's a constant output of neuromuscular tension, but the one that's underneath, which is more emotional, of do I accept the world? Am I open to the world? This guy really closed himself down. They start as neuromuscular patterns. I agree, they are neuromuscular patterns. What the therapy world has largely missed is that, in my opinion, this is the fascia story anyway, what the world has largely missed is if you hold a neuromuscular pattern for long enough, the body essentially says, excuse me, I'm anthropomorphizing the body, but the body says, you don't want a muscle here. If you've got a forward head posture, and your levator scapulae stops being levator scapulae and becomes capitis preventus going forwardus. Yeah, it's working in eccentric load all the time.
Yeah,
and after a while, essentially, your body says you don't want a muscle there. Muscles are designed to pump. If you're going to use it as a strap, we're going to replace your muscle with a strap because muscles are too expensive physiologically to maintain if all you're using it for is a strap. So I'm anthropomorphizing, but what happens is if the muscle isn't pumped, the muscle cells degrade. The more tension that's going through there, especially eccentric load tension, but concentric too. But eccentric load is the one that really gets us into trouble more. that's gradually going to be replaced by fascial strapping instead of a muscle. And that happens all over your body, and everybody has a pattern. Even if I got 100 sessions of rolling and 60 sessions of physiotherapy and things like that, you'd still recognize me if you saw me from a couple of blocks away by my characteristic pattern of movement. So all we're trying to do with the kind of fascial therapy that we're doing is saying, yes, you have to change the neuromuscular patterns, but if you don't change the fascial patterns, also the neuromuscular patterns are going to reestablish themselves. Now, this isn't magic. When you do training, you're changing the fascial patterns. They just change more slowly. The neuromuscular patterns will change if you go into a gym and you start working out, start doing a proper job of training yourself. The muscles will change in 5 or 6 weeks, depending on your age and your physiology. But your fascia will take 5 or 6 months to make that adjustment. That's why so many people get injured in the first, the winter's over, I got to get myself in shape for summer. And then they go out and injure themselves because the muscles may be able to go up a fast ramp. The nerves may be able to go up a fast ramp. But the fascia is your big Swiss dog who comes afterwards slowly and loyally with the brandy on his neck. But
okay.
One perspective. For a person that's not too much into it, like you guys are, that's pretty profound, because that also means that it's very connected to, because what you're explaining is also charge that's being put from your mental state into your muscles. And I imagine that having your fascia being, what did you call it, going into a strap instead of, what was the other one? Instead of a pump. That means that maybe your posture itself can keep your mind locked in the same. So do you know what I mean?
Yes, that is certainly the idea here. That the posture that you have is showing your attitude. I mean, and yes, this Haltung. You have the word in German, Haltung, which is both inner Haltung and outer Haltung, how you carry yourself. And so that's the neuromuscular pattern. And the fascia idea is, you carry that neuromuscular pattern for, in my case, 75 years, and you will shape the fascia in there. And if you're a physio, if you're a trainer, if you're a body worker, if you're a psychologist, you can really help these processes by opening up the fascial system along the way as part of the process. Maybe usually first, because it's if you're building a house, you want to frame the house out first. So you get the frame right, and then you can put the walls in and the windows in and get all the touches for your house. But you really want to get the frame right first, and that's what we're talking about here, along with osteopathy, chiropractic. They work primarily with, adjusting the joints with high velocity thrusts. We do the same thing, but we do it with slow. We don't. Only like adjustments. We're doing fascial stretching.
Okay, so let's rewind a bit, because I still want the full picture of your history. So what happened between you met Dr. Ida Rolf and to where you are now, basically?
Well, in the process of learning with Ida Rolf, which happened between 74 and 76, in order to be certified in her method, I had to learn anatomy and physiology. I had to go to massage school. I had to do all these things to get ready to do that. And in the process of that, there was an anatomist named Louis Schultz, and he wrote a book called The Endless Web, which was kind of anatomy trains before anatomy trains. It wasn't about muscular connections, but it was about that fascial unity. And he was my teacher, so I credit him with getting me interested in fascia as a dynamic system. But then it really, by the time I went to work, I was in England. I had a practice in Hamburg for a while, and in Rome, and then slowly, fascia became more noticed in the physiotherapy world with the Stechos, and other people were taking up the call. In the 70s, Ida Rolf was kind of alone with this idea, but other people
was
were
that
working
kind of
on it.
woo back then? How was it perceived back then in the 70s?
Oh, it's just, California nutcases have got some other thing to talk about, is how it was taken in the 70s. That it's just been a gradual thing of more and more people seeing what wasn't seen. And I understand why fascia wasn't really noticed, because it's an environment. You guys are too young to remember, but I remember when the word environment came in. We didn't think of that we were living in an environment. We just didn't have that word as part of the cultural consciousness. But we did suddenly with Marshall McLuhan and other people, the ideas of ecology. We realized we were on a finite planet, that it's limited, and that we have to think about the environment in which we live. Fascia is the environment of the body. So medicine has been studying all the things that go on with enzymes and hormones and catalysts and all the other things that make up the flow of the chemistry. And we have said, oh, well, the DNA makes our shape. But there's a gap in there. The DNA delivers the lumber, delivers the bricks, delivers the cement and concrete. It doesn't put them in the shape that they're in to make a building. Your DNA tells you what proteins you can make. It does not shape how the proteins go with each other. It's an unsolved problem in biology, the problem of morphology. And I think the fascia is going to, as we understand the fascia more, it's going to contribute so much to this idea of how we form a human. And that's going to help us form humans who are not as, fucked up as the humans that we have right now.
Okay, wow.
Which is my real purpose, you know? I have students who come along and say, oh, I work on horses or I work on dogs because they're so much better than humans. And I say, good for you. I'm glad you're doing it. I'm working on humans because they're the ones who need the work the most.
Yeah.
Good point.
To the planet, yeah.
But how would you explain fascia to a dummy? Like, really break it down. What is the fascia?
Okay. If you were going to have a body, a multicellular body like cats, dogs, and humans, you have to have a system that coordinates all those cells together into one organism, into a mouse, into a dog, into a giraffe. That is the nervous system. It's centered here, but it goes all over the body. There's no part of the body that, unless you're injured, there's no part of the body that you can touch that you cannot feel, because your nervous system goes everywhere coordinating it. You have to have a system that moves chemistry around the body, because each individual cell needs its groceries delivered and it needs its garbage taken away. So that you have to have a circulatory system that's centered here, but it goes all over the body. Cut me anywhere and I will bleed. Yeah, because that's going all over. The third system that you need to make a multicellular human being is the fascial system, which is the system that holds us together. Now, we have said, oh no, that's your musculoskeletal system. Your musculoskeletal system holds you together, and that includes your Achilles tendon and your plantar fascia and your iliotibial tract. Yeah, those are individual identifiable things within a fascial net, which is actually not separated. It goes all the way from top to toe, to right to left, to front to back, from birth to death. It's one single thing. It forms around day 15 of your embryological life, and it will stay that one thing until you die. Mine is fraying. That's why you see the wrinkles and things like that. I'm getting old, so my fascia is fraying. So far, I've kept it fairly well together so that I can still do the things of daily life, but one of these days that will give out. But we just really haven't understood the system that holds us together. Now, you asked, what is fascia for a newbie? It really consists of two bits. One, more people are familiar with. It's the Bindegewebe. It's the binding white sinewy fiber that you can see in all animals and certainly see in us. It's what you take off from around a piece of chicken, or the white lines you find in meat. All of these things are the fascia. Many of these membranes are so thin that they haven't been taken up in science as being really important. But these membranes are the membranes that shape us. They shape us in embryology, and they shape us in emotion. So they shape us in our life. Now, this system, I have to stand up and change, because this system is centered right here in your dantian. That's the center of your fascial system, which actually isn't a piece of fascia at all, right? The center of your circulatory system is definitely part of your circulatory system. The center of your nervous system is definitely part of your nervous system. But the center of your fascial system is just a point somewhere in front of your sacral promontory or the L5 body.
So it's the belly button? That's the center?
Well, that's close enough, but the center of gravity of your body is about 4 centimeters below the navel and a couple of inches in.
Interesting.
So the navel is certainly a developmental center, but if you take if somebody goes off a diving board and goes, the center of gravity of their body is right right in the center of the body. So that's the center of your fascial system is actually in the middle of your guts, in the middle of your small intestine.
Interesting. And then I saw this Google talk with you, where you had pictures, and to me that was mind blowing. Seeing pictures of fascia, it looked like slime you could definitely see how it was holding it all together and how the organisms were crawling on it to affect it and to make it stronger and stuff. So when I know we talked about chicken thing where you cut it off. And that's dead fascia and living fascia. Is there a difference to those in the way that you imagine it?
Good question. That's one of the things that slowed down the research on fascia is it was considered inert, dead material. Like, you're not, when you open up a package from Amazon, which we Americans do all the time, when you open up a package from Amazon, you're not interested in the plastic peanuts. You're interested in the thing that's inside the plastic peanuts. So similarly in anatomy, we went through the peanuts of the body, which is this packing material of fascia, to get to the liver and the biceps and the other interesting things that we could find in it, and not paying much attention to the it that it was in. And you hit very well on that. It's not a dead, inert material. It is a very dynamic, changing, responsive material, your fascia. We're familiar with the idea that you have lots of soldiers in your body. These are the white blood cells and the T cells and the macrophages, and they're going out to fight the invader and to keep you healthy. We're familiar with that idea, yeah? You also have about an equal number of gardeners in your body. They are not soldiers. They are gardeners, and they are gardening your fascial garden, I guess, your fascia. They crawl, you said you saw organisms, but they're actually your cells, and they're crawling around the fascia, and they are clipping off the old dead fascia with enzymes, and they are laying down new fascia, and that new fascia is Schleim. It is snot. It is mucopolysaccharides or glycoaminoglycans. There are long words for it, but essentially it is Schleim, such as your body has lots and lots and lots of Schleim. So we're familiar with the fibrous stuff, the sinewy stuff, the Bindegewebe that makes up the fascial system, and less conversant with the Schleim that makes up the other half. They're actually a spectrum. It goes from the fiber over to the slime. It's not one and the other. It's a spectrum that goes all the way through from bone to blood, from very, very hard tissue to very, very soft tissue. And the body can change the tissue according to the needs because it's being gardened all the time by these fascial cells called fibroblasts that are the gardeners of your fascial system and your body. Again, a few of my gardeners have quit, and so my skin is beginning to fall off, and I have to be careful with my joints now and things like that. But for 70 years, it did really well.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Fascia.
Yeah.
But you said you were 75, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's a pretty good job. Yeah. You've been taking good care of your fascia team.
Yeah.
No, I have all of the usual habits and a few other bad ones, but I really like my work. I think that's why I'm doing
passion. Yeah. So you talked about the makeup of fascia is hardly fibroblasts. What about something like collagen? How big of a role is that in fascia?
Okay, so we talked about the fibrous part and the slimy part. Collagen is the major one of the fibrous part. It's a long, thin molecule. Oh, I don't know. But if I had a rope that was 1 meter long and 1 centimeter thick. That would be about the proportion of a collagen molecule. And it would look like a rope. It's 3 strands, 2 proteins and a glycine wrapped up with each other so that it's a 3-stranded rope. Therefore, it's a little bit elastic and capable of twisting and untwisting. And we found that none of these fibers connect up end to end like this. They are all connected by overlap. So if I had glue or some sticky things in between my 2 hands here, that would do it. Now, the idea is that when you heat the body up by exercise, or if you can heat the body up locally with your pressure of your hand, and then put a stretch on it, that these collagen fibers will slide along each other and then reform their bonds sideways with each other. And in that way, you get an increase in length. This is called fascial plasticity, and you count on it to grow, you count on it to heal yourself and repair yourself, but we haven't made as much use of it as we can in therapy and training.
But that's basically how we become more flexible?
Yeah, well, the collagen is, the collagen, when it overlaps and gets really, really tight, it gets very, very unflexible. I mean, how how much time do you have to spend on your hamstrings to get them to actually be long enough to put your hands on the ground? It's some of it's in your mind, some of it's the muscle letting go, but some of that's the fascial letting go, and you can't talk your fascia into letting go.
You got to do it again and again and again, right? Just keep repeating
it again, or with sustained time. That's the other thing that the yoga people all talk about. Should you be doing it for 30 seconds? Should you be doing it for 45, 90? Everybody has their own different ideas on this.
Yeah, because that's another thing, because I'm not that big of a proponent of yoga, but I know you are. Because the way I see yoga is that you're doing sometimes an unnatural movement for a prolonged period of time, and I cannot see how that could be healthy. So I would like to hear your perspective on why yoga should be so good for fascia as you say that it is.
Okay, well, let me be really clear. There are so many different kinds of yoga.
Yes,
You can't be for yoga because it isn't one thing.
For sure.
However, yes, you do hear me advocate for yoga a lot, but I really want it to be the small y yoga in terms of people need to move. So I was very happy to see yoga go from something that was very obscure and not available to something that was available in every gym, in every street corner. People could find yoga because at least that was something that everybody could do. And secondly, now to get back to the fascia, it's something that employed that plasticity of fascia. You put a stretch on the fascia and you keep it on for a while. Let's see if I have something that would do that. And just like this plastic, it will stretch. So I'm putting a stretch on this plastic bag here, and I'm sustaining that stretch like a yoga stretch for minutes and minutes and minutes. And I don't know if you can see it, but when I'm done, this plastic is stretched. You can wait all morning. It's not going to come back. So that's a plastic property as opposed to an elastic property. Yoga is good at stretching things for plastic change of length. Yoga as generally practiced is terrible for building elasticity. You find these people with all kinds of joint problems, etc., because, as you say, they've been putting themselves in unnatural positions and staying there for a long time. The idea of yoga is great. Yoga was not designed for 21st century people. It was designed for Brahmins in the 1700s or 1600s, something like that. They say it goes back to Patanjali in the 3rd century AD. Okay, that's fine, but nobody knows what they were practicing back then. And besides, whatever they were practicing back then, they were practicing for an agricultural economy, not an electronic economy. We need to completely redesign yoga for the 21st century, and then it won't be called yoga, it'll be called something else. So I'm not anti-yoga, I'm not pro-yoga, I am pro-movement and pro-people doing different kinds of movement.
But I guess there's also another aspect to yoga, which is the spiritual aspect and the chakra aspect and the inner energy that is not movement related, right? Or maybe it is actually movement related.
Okay, I'm not commenting on that part of yoga
Yeah.
at all. Whatever people's spiritual practice is, that's up to them.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
and yoga comes along with the spiritual practice, but I was just talking about the physical
movements themselves.
practice.
Yeah.
And you know, when I started in this, there was only one yoga. There was Iyengar yoga from the 70s. We were all doing it. And now there are so many different kinds of yoga that you can really take your choice as to what kind you want.
But then that kind
there's even wine in yoga. There's wine in yoga in the United States. So
there's wine. Okay.
but then
you detox to retox.
Yeah, it's become an industry for sure. But then that brings us on to saying, how should we move? Because we're living in a world where we're sitting down on office chairs, we're sitting in our car, we're taking public transportation, we barely even walk. I mean, people in general. And if you do, you really have to motivate yourself. We eat sugar and processed food. What is the perfect movement that we could do now? Let's say that, like, what should we all be doing?
There isn't an all be doing thing. I'm sorry try to escape your question because it's a good question. But movement does need to be designed individually. I mean, we could, if this is something I've been thinking about for a while, if you went into the schools and you said, I'm not just going to do repetitive exercise, I'm not just going to do competitive exercise where we're, have teams or individuals against each other and who can do the best, that's all fine. I don't want to take that away at all. But it's the only way in which you can participate in movement. And I go to schools regularly, first with my own child a long time ago, and then regularly now to visit with other children. And the amount of movement, they don't even do recess anymore where you get out and run around crazily outside the school. It's way too much sitting. I think ADHD is the sane response to an insane request, which is sit down all day, child.
Yeah.
That's not a good request. So a wide variety of movement would be really great. Stretching and bouncing and balancing and all of that kind of thing. I hope that by the time we get going here, this is a larger discussion, so excuse me for going into this for a minute, but we are having fewer and fewer children in the world. Yes, they're in the third world countries, population is still growing, but in the developed countries, population is leveling out, if it has not already leveled out, as it has in Japan, which means the children are going to be a more and more precious resource. Right? Children have always been a precious resource, but in the old days, if the child looked sickly, you put him out in the rocks or the wolves. Only the strong survived in that kind of situation. Now we're allowing everybody to survive, which is fine. I've got no problem with that, but it means we have to be responsible for how do we bring them along. And in the general population, we're bringing people along, as you pointed out, with too much sugar, too much sitting, not enough opportunity for movement, and not enough engagement with the real life. I have 2 children with me right now. In fact, when we get done with this, I'm sure they're going to be awake. But my partner is handling them right now. But they are 9 and 12, and they're coming to visit us for a week, and they're absolutely wonderful, but they are so indoctrinated into this electronic world that if they can't know something right now, if they can't talk to somebody right now, if it isn't, there's no delayed gratification. And I know I sound like an old person when I'm talking about this, but I really worry about what is going to happen with the children if any of this system falls down, if we lose the internet that we're working on right now. If we lose some of the conveniences that we have, what happens to these children? They seem unresilient to me, and I want more resilience. So I would design a movement. I guess I'm getting back to your question now. I would design a movement program for children that was designed to build resilience, emotional resilience, spiritual resilience, as well as physical resilience.
How can you build? Because I think that's really fascinating when you said that all the way in the beginning, about your thoughts controlling your muscles, controlling your emotional response to something, which then ends up being your whole posture. and your posture itself can keep you in that mental state or that attitude. And if you unlock that posture, maybe that will have a reverse effect on your brain.
It's kind of interrelated.
How is there any way, we know how people are sitting. They are hunched over like this on their phone.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I don't know exactly, but is there any way to unlock that with some motions you can do every day now that we know what kind of motions? It's a lot of sitting down in a car, and it's a lot of looking at a phone with a bent neck. What can you do to counteract that?
Okay, well, the obvious thing is if you're going to use the phone is that's flexion. You need to counteract it with extension, but people will simply get hypermobile lumbars if you don't give them some instruction in how to get out of the flexion that they're doing. But let's be real. People have been working in flexion for, 20,000 years now since we've been cultivating. Everybody bends over with a stick, with a hoe, with a something.
Yeah.
And they all work in flexion. So everybody, when you get out, you shrug your shoulders and come back. And I'm an advocate of that kind of thing. I don't want to stop working. Most of my work is in front of me. I can't assemble things behind me. It doesn't work. So I am a advocate of when people come to me, I want to give them a sense of where home is. Yes, if you're arched like this, you never can rest. If you're slumped like this, you never can open up with the breath. So I want to find somewhere, and it may not be perfect, but it's someplace that is home for them. With the neutral pelvis, with a neutral diaphragm, with as close as possible to a neutral neck and jaw for eating and speaking. And those are the things that I look for when somebody comes to me as a therapy. But I think I'm going back to these things need to be instituted. I don't see how we get around exercise. In spite of what people have put in books, there is no Paleolithic society. There is no hunter-gatherer man who gets up in the morning and runs 5 kilometers. No. That is a stupid waste of energy for any system that's trying to conserve energy and go. But we need to do that. I ran 6 kilometers this morning because I don't have enough movement in my life. I have to put movement in my life because I have a car. I have everything convenient for me.
But some of what blew my mind with the work of Anatomy Trains and the book that you wrote was this whole interconnected thing about the myofascial meridians. So there must somehow be a blueprint of movement, because what I've been taught during my education was this thing that you said about the muscle dominance, that we have a separate part that is part of the connected unit, where you say the opposite thing, that everything is connected, and we can somehow separate the connected into these meridians. So isn't the meridians the evidence that there is some sort of a connection or some sort of a set of rules that we need to follow when we move? You know what I mean, with the spiral line and all that?
I will definitely go with you in the first part. I don't know if I'll go with you in the second part. The absolutely the truth of it is that there is one muscle in 600 fascial pockets.
Yeah.
We got on the idea that there are 600 muscles, and we have learned a lot by studying the joints and the ligaments and the pathways of those muscles. I'm not trying to take away everything that we have learned with origin, insertion, action, and innervation. That's a great thing. However, it is this kind of separate industrial way of thinking about the body as a set of levers.
Yeah.
And the body doesn't develop that way, and it doesn't work that way. You don't use muscles isolatedly. Even the exercise that's the quintessential exercise of biceps curls, it's designed to isolate the biceps. It doesn't isolate the biceps at all. The biceps is connected to the pectoralis minor here. Biceps is connected down through to your thumb here. So once I had this idea that, that Ida Rolf gave me, I didn't have the idea, that there is this fascial net that's all over everything in the body. When I was teaching anatomy in her school back in the 70s or 80s, I guess, I simply made up the anatomy trains as a game. That's why it has that name, you can get on the track here, the Zug here, and go from serratus anterior to external oblique, from external oblique to internal oblique over here, from internal oblique to the tensor fascial lata. And I just started saying to my students, how far can you get on the train? Because no anatomy book was talking in this way, was talking about how things are interconnected. They were always talking about the individual action of the muscle. And again, I'm not trying to take that away. It's great. It just isn't complete. So I started working on this in the, I guess, mid to late 80s. People tell me I was talking about this in the mid to late 80s, but I really developed it in the 90s and was asked by Leon Chetau, who started the Journal of Bodywork and Movement Therapies. He asked me to write an article for it, which I did in 97. And then the publisher came and said, write a book. And I thought maybe 2,000 people will read this book. I really hope that we sell 3,000 of them, but now we're something over 400,000 now, and it's in 17 languages, and it's been a much more of a success than I ever thought in terms of changing people's minds. But it's a transitional map. It's a map, but it's a transitional map. And so now we get to the second part. So yes, it's simply a different way of looking at how musculoskeletal function works in the body. The engineering is different from the leverage engineering that we're familiar with. Now, does that mean that there is a particular way that people should move, or does it mean that the system was designed to move in multiple ways depending on the needs of your life? So, yeah, I definitely see people who, you think of lots of old people in your practice like me, who move around like this. They don't move their neck and their torso separately. They couldn't do this kind of thing that I'm doing, of shoving my hips to one side and the other, but keeping my eyes on the prize. These are kinds of things that I do with older folks to keep them in the game doing this thing. But I really do think that there is not I haven't come to the conclusion that there is a universal movement program that would be good for everybody. I think we have to look and see what the child needs.
So yeah, but what you're still implicitly saying is that we shouldn't isolate movement, right?
I think it's impossible to isolate movement personally, but...
Yeah, but isn't that what we do in the gym today, with traditional fitness, with bodybuilding, all that stuff? We're looking at one or two muscles at a time when we approach the body.
Yeah, we try to do that. I was doing something with Eric Cressy, who is the rehab guy for the New York Yankees, a big team over here. And the pitchers, to get a stronger throw, have so overdeveloped the latissimus that they are compressing the spine and creating problems in their low back simply by their own training of overtraining this one particular muscle. Things have to be trained in holes. I don't know I'm quite thinking, but I presume the anatomy trains are part of those holes. But you don't move by the front line and then the back line either. The lines are there to hold you in stability while your mind calculates things. I was trying to put a screw into the wall close to the ceiling, and I ended up putting my head against the ceiling and pressing it to stabilize my body to go in. I didn't think of that. My body just did it when I was there because I needed the stability, and there was a ceiling and I could put my head on it.
Yeah.
I'm sure my body has no program for that. I don't think the anatomy is designed for that, but we create solutions. We're very inventive in creating solutions for our body. I've been watching these kids this week because I have a sailboat, and so I take the kids out on the sailboat, and it's a whole new environment for them. They've never been on this particular jungle gym before. And so they throw themselves around, and I try to keep them from falling off. But generally, they're getting all kinds of movement that they wouldn't ordinarily get. The second day, and these are very energetic children, they were totally tired. They were completely, my body is so sore, because they were using muscles that, even though they're active children, they weren't using those muscles in whatever it was they were doing in their home in California. I am a big advocate of variety.
Variety.
Okay.
Variety, yeah.
That's also what you mean.
Let me just finish this one, okay? I just need to clarify the whole thing. is there force transmission through the lines? Do we know that?
Yes. Yes, we know there is force transmission through the lines. Jan Wilke, working in
what happens
Germany.
when we create movement. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. But Jan Wilke and his group are doing work on myofascial force transmission through the lines. So far, it's a literature search. It's not him doing the actual research, but now he's beginning to do research with equipment about myofascial force transmission, and it's being confirmed in some of the cases, like what I call the superficial backline. That's the force transmission along that is really easy to track. A lot harder in the superficial front line, which is your sternocleidomastoid here, going through the chest fascia into the rectus abdominis and down the front of the leg. The force transmission there is harder to document. Now, what does that mean? Maybe it works more individually or something. I put out the map, but I will tell you, I am not a scientist. I'm a visionary, if you want to put it that way, but I haven't done any research. This has all been...
Okay. For a new guy that does not know what that means and what implication that has for understanding of what we move, what does that exactly mean? A line through your back where power...
Have you seen these lines?
No, I have not seen these lines.
Let's say...
Okay, we're looking in the book now.
Superficial backline is always a good example because that's very tangible.
Okay.
You can see this line here, right?
Yeah.
Going from the scalp and all the way down to the plantar fascia.
Yeah.
Right? So just following this myofascial line, running all the way down here, all the way up here. To the viewers, like here as well. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So,
nice.
If I take this skeleton, let me just give you a little bit more of it here, from the waist up to the neck. And if I look at the musculature underneath the shoulder, we see that there is a kind of inverted V of sternocleidomastoid and splenius capitis, and then under the scapula we have the internal intercostals and external intercostals, which make this kind of X, like the external and internal oblique. That comes down to the iliac crest, and then we keep going with the iliotibial tract down the side of the leg. Everybody has this anatomy. It's designed to make it very easy for you as a former fish to take your skeleton this way. That's your lateral line. So, it has a function. It has a similar function in everybody. But what part of it might be really good or what part of it might be really held up really does vary from person to person. That's what I teach, is how to see that and then how to...
And then you can unleash this power that is in the fascia. Is that what it means? The line?
Sorry. Myofascial force transmission. You asked the question. I talked too much. You asked the question and I didn't answer it. Yes. If you generate force, as you do when you push off, with every step, with every leap, with every run you push off your big toe. That force transmission goes from the plantar fascia around the heel into the Achilles tendon, and then at the knee, it's interconnected, so it passes from the gastrocnemius heads to the hamstrings, and this has been demonstrated to put the power all the way up to the scalp on the back of the head.
Wow.
So when you push off your foot, the force transmission that goes up the back of your body to your head is really well demonstrated. If you were to go back this way, I can feel that it's, when I go into a back bend, that the whole front of my body is stretching. But that's been harder to show in the literature, that it's actually pressing from the rectus abdominis to the pectoral fascia to the neck. That's been a harder one. So some of my stuff may prove to be wrong, and some of it may prove to be right in the end, but I think that the vision at least points in the right direction of looking more at wholes rather than looking at just parts and parts and parts and see if we can figure out the whole from the parts. I mean, I would say to physiotherapy, physiotherapy, you've had these 600 muscles for 300 or 400 years now. How are your models of walking? I'm sorry, physio, but the models of walking are not that great. Most of them presume that we're kind of like a wheel and we're falling on to the next leg. Human walking is a much more dynamic thing, and the leg is not a post or a spoke of a wheel on which we run. It's a very complex and dynamic mechanism that I am really come to appreciate over the years. And so understanding the dynamics of gait, of breathing, of sitting, you were talking about sitting, these are things that we need to understand
better.
And this force transmission is really important to the understanding of, oh, this problem in my neck is actually sourced down here in my low back, in my waist, in my hip, somewhere else.
Can you bring that over, that one?
Yeah.
Like
the Tensegrity model, yeah. That's also very interesting, yeah.
This one.
Yeah.
That means, as far as I understand, and that this is what really made sense to me the first time when I saw the Google one. This is masses. So let's say you have an injury up here, or this is your fascia. I guess that these
the strings of the fascia.
Strings are the fascia, and then if something is off in the system, you will actually be able to detect it. Oh, holy hell! One, yeah,
similar kind of structure.
Yeah.
Yours is a model of the pelvis. If you take those two long ones and you work them like walking, you'll see how
wow. Yeah, okay, I can see that. Yeah. Interesting.
So, now the elastics are both the muscles and the fascia. They are myofascial. They are the soft tissue. The dowels are like the bones. So if I have exported from my brain, remember, right? This is my brain telling my muscles to contract because I'm scared, because I'm happy, because I'm whatever, and I create that tension. That tension is going to distribute itself through the whole thing. Do you see that? You see the upper dowel moving, the upper horizontal dowel moving. I'm nowhere near it. I'm not touching it. But by force transmission, the force is transmitted from one to the next. This idea of origin insertion presumes that the end of the force is at the end of the muscle, and all of the force is transmitted to the bone. And that's the assumptions that we've been working on.
Yeah.
But Hoying and his group in Amsterdam showed very clearly that that's not the case. The force that's at this end of the muscle is not transmitted all the way to the other end of the muscle. 35 to somewhere between 30 and 60% of the force is distributed sideways, or anatomy trains idea, distributed beyond the insertion to the next.
So what is so special about what is so special about walking then? You said that walking had a special perspective for you.
Well, because I learned a lot. I used to worry about, I used to think about when somebody came in, oh, do you have high arches or low arches? And we want your arches to be in the middle for that to be the best foot. And then working with the ideas of Gary Gray, who were brought to me by one of my teachers called James Earls, who wrote a wonderful book called Born to Walk.
We had him on the podcast, yes.
Yeah, you've had him on the podcast. So he was the one who took my ideas, brought them into this idea of gait, and then gave it back to me in a really expanded form that I've really appreciated. So that if we look at the leg and the foot, this whole design, it's not a mistake that there are 26 bones in the foot and that these go into pronation to cushion the blow between heel strike and weight acceptance, and then supinates into a nice locked position as we get to the push-off, so that it's a faithful transmitter of the force up the body, as we were just speaking. Even the separation between the tibia and the fibula is necessary for this whole Mortisen tendon at the tibio-talar joint to work, the Oberschenkelgelenk, and then the knee. The knee is an elbow designed by a committee because the knee has to do so many things that that's why there are so many injuries in the knee. It has to be able to rotate to be able to walk. So it's this, I'm very appreciative of the ability of the leg to go from a shock absorbing device to a faithful force transmitter in the half second it takes you to go from being on your heel to being on your toes. It's I find legs really, especially in the latter part of my thing, I've been, oh, that was really stupid. You were just looking at whether the arch was high or the arch was low. Much more important to know whether the arch is dynamic or static and how is it working. Is that at the first metatarsal base? Is it the cuneiform? Is it the navicular? Which part of the arch is failing. All of those things have gotten much more detailed for me in the latter half of my practice.
But then I'm just thinking now, with this, it's almost like a revolution in moving in a way, you're seeing it in a whole new way. What has that done? Because that's another thing I heard you say, the body will change with demand. Like we also talked a little bit before. So are you a gardener? Well, or are you someone that's doing gymnastics? Then your body will transform to become good at that. You can't be good at everything. You will be good at what you will need in your environment. Then, now that we know this is the way that we move, what about athletes and the way that they train and the way that we train in that? How can they optimate to do that fascia training?
Okay, there is under Robert Schleip and now other people, I think I haven't followed it more recently, there is an idea of fascial fitness. And we've been thinking about neurological health, coordination. We've been certainly thinking about muscular health, hypertrophy and hypotrophy and all the trigger points and all those things that happens in muscles. Now we're adding what happens in the fascia to that. I just lost myself. What was the question?
How can we add fascia training into what people are doing already?
So the things that fascia training tell us that muscular training might not tell us if we were just thinking about the musculoskeletal system is that you need to vary the vectors. We talked about that before, that if you're constantly doing things with the same vector, fascia might be strong and the fascia right beside of it will be very weak because you never exercise that.
Mm-hmm.
If you're working machines, if you're working weights, they go on very predictable arcs.
Yeah.
So when I do weights, I was doing some weights this morning, so I do them crazy all over the place so that my joints are subject to various vectors. Because when you're on the sailboat, which is my other sport, the forces don't come at you in prescribed ways. They come at you in however they're going to come at you. So your body better be ready for all these different forces. And that's what I would hope that we would do with our children, is prepare them for life in a general way. And then if you want to train for a particular athletic thing, but boy, I was working in China where the athletes are really, they aren't even getting any academic education. They're just focused on their sport. And if you do nothing but dive, if you do nothing but fence, if you do nothing but this one sport, you are going to shape yourself into that sport. And that's not necessarily great for you in 20 or 30 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah?
That's like high heels, It makes your hips move in a very attractive way. I find it attractive myself, but it's not, if you're going to wear those shoes for 20 or 30 years, there's going to be consequences in your low back.
Yep.
Very few people can make that kind of adaptation. And the adaptation that we've asked people's bodies to make that's really just so hard is so much sitting, so much inactivity in front of the computer or in front of in public transport.
Yeah. But I guess part of your of the answer to your question is also fascial recoil. You talked about it as elasticity. Some of what I've been researching is this relationship between the predator and the prey, where the prey is most often surviving, and this despite them being often very tiny, like a gazelle or something like that, in relation to the lion or the tiger, for example. So that whole thing about muscle dominating in contrast to fascia is kind of interesting here, because we know that there's a lot of kinetic energy happening in the fascia, which is a term is called fascial recoil, for example. So how could we use that?
Absolutely. We use fascial recoil by any kind of bouncing thing. Walking is a fascial recoil exercise.
Yeah,
I run on the balls of my feet. I do 4-foot running. It's only the toes and the balls of my feet touch. My heels don't touch. I'm not recommending it to you. It's what works for me to keep elasticity in my body. And I run not on a soft surface, but on a hard surface. I run on concrete if I can, because I want the bounce to be in my body. People say, oh, I'm going to get one of those little trampolines that you just bounce on this trampoline, and I will get elasticity that way. And it will help. But most of the elasticity is in the machine. not in you. You want to be bouncing on something hard so that you encourage the elasticity in you, not the elasticity in the outside world. That's what we keep trying to do, is make the outside world elastic so we can be still, but we don't want that. We should make ourselves elastic, I think.
Yeah.
Other thing that's coming up, I just put this in for you to think about, is what's coming up is the other property of fascia that we haven't explored much yet, is viscosity. I don't know how that translates auf Deutsch, but viscosity, the viscosity is the thickness, like Eiweiß, like egg white. It has viscosity to it.
And
that
like
makes it a big shock absorber.
Yeah.
And we have not really explored the role of fascia as a shock absorber in the body.
Okay. So that's a new area of research maybe that can have a big impact.
Yeah, but I also just mean that the muscles are producing or consuming a lot of energy, whereas the fascia is like solar panels, right? It's kind of free energy. So if we can leverage the fascia instead of only relying on muscles, I guess that's kind of a cheat code if we can really learn how to use fascial recoil in our movement. So we kind of limit muscle contraction, like in walking, for example.
Okay, so this theory is behind the idea of man, the persistent hunter. So clearly, we cannot run as fast as a cheetah, and as you just pointed out, the cheetah doesn't always catch the gazelle, right? Sometimes the gazelle escapes the cheetah. So how often is the gazelle going to escape us? All the time. We can't run as fast as a gazelle. So the idea that people, once they realize that we use elasticity. So when I run on my forefoot, my foot comes down, it elasticizes my plantar fascia and my Achilles tendon. I can't put my arm like that, and then boom, as you say, free energy. I get that energy back as I push off. We thought that, when you come down, the muscle gets longer and then you contract the muscle and it pushes you off. Well, it does, but the muscle is more or less in an isometric contraction, not a concentric, eccentric, or a concentric and let go. But it's more or less doing just an isometric contraction, and the Achilles tendon is getting longer, and then boom, giving you the energy back, as long as you use it within a second. You can't store this energy and then take it out next week and use it. It will adjust to itself. Wow. So if you imagine you're playing basketball, you go up to get the ball, and then boom, you come down on the ground. If you were nothing but elasticity, you, like the ball, would bounce off the ground like this.
Yeah.
So you can use your muscles to stop that elasticity by relaxing the muscles at the right moment, and your body learns how to do this, so that when you come down on the ground, you stay there, and you turn and you go to the other end. But you don't. Sometimes you want to bounce, and sometimes you don't want to bounce. So it has viscosity, it has elasticity, it has the plasticity that we talked about, and then the fourth one is remodeling, and that's all the gardeners going around and remodeling your fascia. If you break your bone, tear your tendon, just general maintenance.
Then
my maintenance is beginning to fail. But
not that much though. But I have one question then. Because I played basketball before, and there are some people that just have an insane bounce. Like, they can jump so high, even though they might not look like the biggest muscle ever. Is that because they're so good at timing their, what's it called, the fascial recoil, that they're able to bounce off like that?
Yep, and they probably wouldn't tell you that that's what they don't really know that that's what they're doing. It just feels good to the athlete. But absolutely, you're making use of that fascial recoil. Doing that. Yep.
Wow. Yeah, because you always had that idea that it depends on how muscle you have, but still, some people, they just seems to be able to, all of a sudden, when it clicks to them, once they understand it, they just, they jump so high, and it looks so bouncy.
We haven't done enough research to know exactly what this is yet. But I know for myself that when I started to do this forefoot running, because I wasn't doing that, I started about 20 years ago. And when I first started out, my tendons were like a Tempur-Pedic mattress. You know, these, like a foam. because over the years they hadn't been tensed, so they'd soaked up water, and so they were okay as tendons, but they weren't designed to do this elastic job. So as I did this over months, and I know this happened not because I felt it, because I've seen the research. Over the months of training in this elastic movement kind of way, the water gets squeezed out of the tendon, and the tendon becomes less like a Tempur-Pedic bed and more like a metal spring. And so that's why I have wanted to do this, is I wanted to maintain bounce in my body as I got older, because elasticity is a attribute of youth. Yeah. If little Johann falls down the stairs, maybe he gets a bruise. If grandma falls down the stairs, it could be really bad at the bottom. Yes, because she's not as elastic. Well, I was headed towards grandma's age, so I made myself.
But it makes sense though that you're more elastic, meaning like if you bounce it, so like you got something in your head, you're more able to, because your body just like gets the recoil and get back if you stay elastic, if you stay doing those things.
The longevity marker, you can say.
And I guess the toe.
I'm hoping for
but the toe thing is a good one, because that's the one that goes all the way through up to your body, all the way to your cranium. You get bounced the whole way. What about your arms and those things? How will you remain bounced in those?
Yeah, so I do this. I don't do all this work I suggested, but with occupational therapists or physios, if you start with somebody older and you just put them, 15 centimeters away from the wall, and you just have them bounce in and out, and then you can gradually increase the distance from the wall. A wall of books is not the best wall. But you get them to be bouncy in the upper body. Now, that's not only doing my shoulders, it's also getting bounce into my thoracolumbar fascia and lower back to do that kind of thing. So you can dial these back for people who are infirm, and you can dial it up for the athlete who is looking for that last centimeter.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's actually funny, because I just got to remember that back in the days I used to study traditional Chinese medicine, and we were taught all about these meridians for acupuncture and all this stuff. And then afterwards I learned about the anatomy trains, and I found so many similarities between your meridians, if we can call them your meridians, and then the Chinese meridians. So could there be a correlation, or is this just coincidence?
We're all climbing the same mountain of the body.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't be surprising, but I will tell you that once somebody came into my class in my early days of teaching these things and said, this thing that you were talking about, the biceps connection to the thumb, that's the lung meridian that comes here.
Yeah.
And I decided I am not going to try to put these two systems together. I don't have enough knowledge about acupuncture to be good about this. So if you look in the back of the book, you'll find a chapter written by a very eminent doctor of Asian medicine, and he made the correlation between the anatomy trains and things. But what I did was solely based on Western medicine. If it has some kind of correlation to the acupuncture meridians, that's because we're working on the same thing, but not because I tried to make that happen at all.
Yeah, but the thing is, you're not working on the same thing, and that's the funny part, because they're looking at the human body from another perspective. They are searching for something different than you. So that's why I just found it funny.
Yeah, the sinew channels, what they call the sinew channels, are close to what I'm talking about in terms of these connections. But I just emphasize what is in my book is entirely based on Western anatomy.
But also, there's also other aspects that's similar. In Chinese medicine, the meridian points is qi, it's energy, which is what you described before. It is signals, not signals for your brain, but it's basically electrical signals that is being transported around your body, which is kind of similar to what we've been talking a little bit about here,
Yeah.
It is, but I think the anatomy trains would be a one application of acupuncture, but acupuncture has lots of applications in terms of physiology and energy, stuff that I'm just not qualified.
Yeah, it's with the needles and all that stuff too, and it's an interesting system for sure, but it definitely feels like,
But for those interested, the research of Hélène Langevin, Helen Langevin, who works in the University of Vermont, I think, over here. Her combination between fascia and acupuncture, for those interested in it, that Langevin would be the person to follow to get that.
Okay, wow.
And one of the first things you talked about today was fluidity in the fascia. Many people talk about fascial dehydration. Some talk about the formation of trigger points, fascial adhesions, etc. And I think it all comes down to how well your fascia is hydrated. So, but I think it's difficult to find the concrete answer to how the fascia gets hydrated. Can you clarify on that point?
Yes. So we talked about the two parts of the fascia. We said it was a spectrum between really fluid, lymphatic, flowy, slimy kind of fascia over to the very solid. Now, if you have scar tissue or an injury with scar tissue from surgery or injury, that fibrous stuff could clog up and stop the blood from flowing through. It's just so clogged here, you can't get through, and so you have to break it up, or the body just lives without that particular circulation. The other thing, however, and so we understand that with scar tissue, that's the fibrous part of it. We use our hands or a tool or something like that to break it up. The other is, what about the slimy mucopolysaccharides, the mucus in the body? That's good for it to be very viscous to stop bacteria from spreading, or viruses from spreading in your body. You hold viruses in the fascia. We didn't know this. There's a fascial biome. You know about the biome in your gut. There's a biome in your fascia too. There's bacteria and lots of viruses. For instance, herpes viruses sit in the fat and the fascia outside the nervous system. And what is it that allows them to get into the nervous system to make an active herpes outbreak? That's something that we need to find out. That's something about the fascia, probably, ionization or something like that. So it turns out that this slime stuff has a lot to do with our protective mechanisms inside, just physiologically, as well as the protective thing that I talked about, just simply protecting from impact. But both of these things can stop the circulation, for better or for worse.
What kind of circulation?
The circulation of fluids in your body.
Okay,
lymphatic and circulatory fluids. So, again, every cell needs to have their groceries delivered and their garbage taken away. Every cell. So if you don't have a flow around the cell, then you start to get congestion, and the congestion, so said Paracelsus in the 16th century, congestion is the source of disease. So what I'm trying to do is, in my own body, is to reduce congestion wherever I can find it and to keep the fluids circulating, under the idea that with the proper proteins and ions and probiotics, etc., that I can keep this tissue mobile.
Okay. And you do that by what? Moving correctly, doing releases, massages, that stuff, to rehydrate the damaged tissues?
Yes, and also to take those tissues that have gotten sluggish through the mucus getting more mucousy, right? You can have mucus that drips off your nose in a day in January, where it's cold and it's almost liquid. I mean, if you get the liquid off your nose, it has a slight bit of viscosity to it. But if you clean out your cellar, if you clean out the cellar, and then you pick your nose, it's very thick mucus. The mucus in your body is likewise. Some of it, most of it, is very thin and the water can flow through it easily. Some of it is very thick and the fluids cannot flow through it. So we've talked about the fibrous, like scar tissue, where the fiber gets too much, but also the mucus can get too much, and that stops fluids from flowing, and you get an area that's dense, and massage can help, manipulation can help, movement can help, but only if the movement goes to that spot. We don't know athletes who are very active and they move, but they move this spot, but the spot that's right next to it is congested, not moving, because they move in familiar pathways. Again, we want to move in unfamiliar ways sometimes. I tell yoga people, do your yoga badly 2 times a week.
Okay.
Do it well 5 times a week, and do it really badly 2 times a week, so that you vary the thing. That's one of the problems with yoga, is it's the same thing again and again. It's part of the problem of people who are training for tennis. You're not training just for tennis. You're training to be a good tennis player in life. Yeah. Training has become so focused that people get themselves so far down a specialized track. I don't know how Andre Agassi or Bjorn Borg are feeling right now, but I don't imagine that they're feeling really great.
Yeah.
So can you go as far as to say as the wrong physical activity is equally bad as physical inactivity?
Yeah, I think I'd go that far, especially if you're saying repetitive. Yeah. The right activity repeated again and again and again ends up being the wrong activity because it creates a prison that you have to escape from.
It's a pattern. Yeah. Very interesting.
We're talking about sports doing that. Your family does that more than anything else.
Yes.
Your family sets the pattern. Happens to you as a child, your family attitudes and things like that.
Yeah, you
sets
need
the pattern
new
to your
stuff.
body.
Yeah, but that's also very interesting. I mean, that's almost philosophical, I mean, not being stuck in your own patterns all the time, because you don't learn that way either. Like, it's not only your muscle, it's also your brain. I mean, if you don't learn anything new by doing the same things over and over and over again. You gotta be open-minded and go see new stuff and travel and do all kinds of stuff. So it's not only with the body that the whole way of living,
So I have, along the line of what you're saying here in terms of that thinking, I have areas that I can use even at 5 a.m. when I just wake up. I can do these motions. Let's call those number one motions. One motions, those are the motions that are easily available to me. I can put my hands here. But if I want to go farther, put my hands back there, I have to make a special effort. You can hear it in my breath. I'm making a special effort. I'm trying to push my hands back to do whatever yoga, I don't know, whatever thing that I'm supposed to do. Doesn't matter. That takes me to number 2 areas. Number 2 areas are in my movement. They're available to me, but only under special conditions. Right now, if you're listening, if you put your hand on a wall and then turn yourself away from the hand, you'll go from number 1, and then you'll feel the stretch. And when you're feeling the stretch, you're in number 2. And then if you keep turning away from your hand, you will finally get to number 3. It will hurt because the number 3 areas are the areas we don't use at all. So when somebody comes in to see me, I am trying to find their number 3 areas, and they're not going to tell me about their number 3 areas because they don't know about the number 3 areas because they don't move it, so they don't get any reports from it. So it's not painful. The part that really needs to be worked on is not painful. People come in and go, can you work on my neck? Can you work on my shoulder? It works here, it hurts here. Can't you work here? No, because it's hurting over there because you're pulled down here, and these are the muscles that are overworking because of that. I can work on this, and it will slowly make you worse because I'm loosening what you're trying to do to your number 2 areas to make up for this number 3 area over here that you don't even know anything about.
Yeah, so
because so it's the job of the therapist to turn number 3s into number 2s and number 2s into number 1s. But your clients are always telling you about the number 2s. Your clients are always telling you about the compensations that they're doing for the problem. If they could tell you the problem, they would have solved the problem themselves.
That makes so much sense.
So then we're back to the posture again all of a sudden. And I guess that's why posture is an ideal way of assessing people, right?
And then we start looking at this. Okay, so where has the posture, so to speak, gone funny? And I'm just going to make, never mind, I'm not going to tell you the thing, but I'm going to loosen one of these bits here. And all of a sudden, the whole structure is loose. Not just this place. I just did one. I'll do it again. I'll put it back. And it takes me a minute, and it's in this one spot. And then all of a sudden, the whole system is tight again and won't move. It's a little, but doesn't move as much.
It's small,
just by fixing one point.
Yeah. So the points that people tell you about, there we go. Now it's not moving.
How the hell do you go about finding that number 3?
That
experience, right?
That you have to pay me lots of money to teach you that. Because it's a matter of watching people move and seeing where they simply don't move through. Of course, the whole body is moving in space, but they're not moving through their hip. They're not moving through their low back. They don't have the participation of the whole body. I want the whole body to participate as much as possible.
I was just saying that when I assess clients, I always use this measurement of symmetry, because if we have postural symmetry, it's often an indication that we don't have any sort of restrictions that is pulling this tensegrital balance out of way.
And
and once the tensegrital balance gets pulled out of whack, then it just sets that pattern into the body. I had a client come in who had skied into a tree. He was skiing in the Alps and skied into a tree and broke his leg. And compound fracture, tibia and fibula coming through the skin, the whole thing, terrible injury. And we worked on it, and it just wouldn't come around. And to make a long story short, it turned out that he had, on his little bicycle, on a tricycle, when he was 3 years old, turned over on the tricycle and wrenched his knee really badly. But he had gone inside and somebody had felt and said, oh, nothing's broken, go back out and play. And so that pattern was set in, and he had the injury to the ski. Of course, it was a real injury. I'm not saying that wasn't part of it, but that whole part of his body was that leg became a number 3 area after that injury. It got healed, but never made whole. It healed in the sense of remodeling, but it didn't get made whole. And then once we discovered, we're not talking about your injury, we're talking about something that was put in, and it had psychological feeling because the parents didn't do anything, right? They just sent him away. And once we got into that, then his whole leg got healed. And it wasn't a question of finding a spot, it was a question of him finding the memory.
Wow.
Back in there. And that was, and once the memory was there, then the leg, unraveled towards healing. Of course, there's always scar tissue, there's always leftovers, but it went back towards being his leg.
That's so interesting. Before. You remember I told you I had a friend who was sick for a long time, and it was some rare virus that was in his blood that got released through an insect bite, and he couldn't almost breathe for 3 years. He couldn't really look at light, so he was just in a room, very dark room, and he had to be sent to the hospital multiple times with breathing problems. And then he got better, and he was young, so he got better, and he recovered. And then he started. They said the only thing you can do is train to get better. There's no medicine for this. But he had so much respiratory problems, so they started giving him asthma medicine until he was so determined to fix it himself. So he went to someone who gave him a massage, and they gave him a massage on the fascia right here, the diaphragm, while also giving him, like you say, memories and releasing the mental trauma related to these 3 years of being in a dark room and not being able to look at sunlight. And a month after that, he was able to not even use that asthma medicine and recover way faster just from a massage. And to me, when I heard, that's kind of similar to what you just talked about, like the mental and the memory related to that and releasing that as well. It's so interesting.
It is, but I would say to you that the idea that it isn't psychologically and chemically is actually a new idea. The idea that you can separate out those things is a new idea.
Yeah, you're right.
The wise woman in the village or the medicine man in the village knew that everything was psychological, physical, and spiritual all at the same time.
Yeah.
We say, this was a physical thing and he was there and he might have some feelings about it, but it has no effect on his body. That's not true. It absolutely gets imprinted on the physical body in chemical ways, in neurological patterns, and as we started this conversation out with the fascia.
Interesting. But that must also mean then that if you have some problems with your movement or some pains related to movement, then you can basically use your intuition, because somewhere it will make sense to you if you're really open-minded, and that you might be able to sense it yourself.
Yes, I think that if we had we have not focused on feeling the fascia because we didn't even know the fascia was there or understand its significance. Your fascia is the biggest, the most densely organized sense organ you have. You have more nerve endings in your fascia than you have on the retina of your eye. You have more nerve endings in your fascia, and then you have taste buds on your tongue or nerves in your ear. Your brain is intensely interested in what's happening to your fascia because that's how you organize movement. So you have lots and lots of sensors in the fascia, but no motor nerves going to the fascia. I would emphasize that. We have no evidence at all, anywhere, anytime, of fascia actively contracting because of signals from the nervous system. Muscles actively contract. Fascia passively remolds itself around that muscle contraction. But there's no instance except this thing called myofibroblasts, which is a specialty thing. But we don't contract the fascia with our mind. We contract the fascia with those little gardeners going around, making our garden. But we set the tone of the garden by
with the
what
brain.
we do geared to our muscles. Yeah.
Wow.
Interesting.
So interesting to see the body in that way.
Yeah.
And get a new perspective of it, because that's really mind-blowing to me. That's not so much into it like, like both of you are, but mostly you, Tom.
Yeah, it was definitely fascinating hearing all this stuff from you on.
Yeah, on last question.
Yeah, of course, if you have more.
For fascia optimization, which diet is better, meat or vegetarian? We're beginning this new thing.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not a dietitian, and what I'm saying is not...
Only from a fascial perspective.
There are people who have very healthy fascia on a vegan diet. There are other people who have a vegan diet and do not have healthy fascia at all. Their fascia is like fiberglass. So I think there are people who are more suited to this than otherwise. I'm not advocating one sort of diet. I don't think people can afford to eat. I don't think the planet can afford for us to eat meat. But in terms of people's health, that kind of protein, fish protein or meat protein, I have seen it do things with people who were determined vegetarians for the health of the planet and for the health of their body, and their body was breaking down under a vegetarian diet. If you look at the physiology, the length of our digestive tract from mouth to anus is about exactly balanced between a vegetarian and a carnivore. So it's really hard to tell from the evidence of physiology whether we're meant to be carnivores or meant to be vegetarians. Excuse me. But one of the things about humans is they're very adaptable. So they adapt to this, they adapt to that. So I think you can adapt to a vegetarian or a meat diet. People who eat too much meat really do get clogged. In their tissues as well as their arteries. And some people who eat no meat get along really well in their bodies, and some it does not suit them. So that's probably a factor of physiology that I really don't know about it. You'd have to talk to a nutritionist.
Yeah, and this shouldn't be a dietarian or a diet discussion, but maybe we can conclude that collagen-rich foods would be good.
Collagen-rich foods are good, but you don't usually have a lack of supply of mucus. What makes up a stool is mostly mucus. Yes, it's the food. What part of the food you didn't digest, but what makes it a stool, a well-formed stool, is mucus. So you're constantly taking on new mucus and shedding it, taking on new mucus and shedding it.
Interesting.
We're not usually people don't have their fascia fail because of a lack of collagen. There's enough fiber in the diet to make collagen.
Yeah.
Good.
So, you can say it's the same point again. You gotta eat variety, like a variety of things. You can't just eat one thing and go too much into. You gotta feel what's good for you, because you could be healthy in both.
It also makes difference whether you're in an anabolic or catabolic phase. So if you're trying to lose weight, you should be eating in one way. If you're trying to put on muscle, you should be eating in another way. Yeah. Again, I'm not an expert in this, but there's not one size fits all for this.
No, but you're an expert in fascia, that's for sure.
Yeah,
and it was a
pleasure.
Well, this has been a fun discussion. It's great. Thank you so much for.
Yeah, for sure.
It's been a pleasure. I really have blown my mind on this one, because
it's all new to you.
It's new to me, and I like the way of seeing it. I like the way of seeing stuff as ecosystems and living things, and this is the environment and this is the gardener. And to me, that makes sense to explain that. Because if it's not explained like that, it's not interesting to me. And if it's not interesting to me, I won't learn from it, you know. But with these kind of stories, it's super cool and it makes so much sense. And and I guess I've been doing it intuitively. Whenever there's something new, if I see a tree, I will do some exercise in that. If there's a pool, I will swim. If there's stairs, I will do that, you know, because I want to do different things because it makes me feel better. But now it makes so much more sense to understand the depth of it, like as you explained. So thanks for that.
I would along the lines of that, I would encourage everybody who's doing a movement program to maintain their health of just spending a little time each morning or whenever you do it of saying, well, what part didn't I move? You know, what if I try to lift the weights in total internal rotation? Well, you want to lift such weights that you stay within your bounds because you don't want to injure yourself. But doing things in unusual ways makes those number 3 areas become evident to your brain. Something that's really sore, something that goes, whoa, I haven't felt that in a long time. Those are the areas of your body that if you wake them up and include them, they'll be included in your total movement.
Brilliant point.
I would do that.
Move in directions that you don't normally would do. That's a good point. And to those of our listeners who want to learn more from Anatomy Trains or from you, Tom, where should they look?
We're all over on anatomytrains.com. We just launched a new app so people can get access to all our video material. We have tons and tons of dissection that we've done on untreated cadavers so that the fascia the whole connective tissue is natural color and natural movement. Those are available or will be shortly on this app, plus all kinds of techniques and things like the discussions we've been having.
Yeah, amazing. And the app is called Anatomy Trains, I guess?
Yeah, anatomytrains.com. If you type in Anatomy Trains, we're unavoidable.
Awesome.
Other people are using it. I just want to say one thing about that. Other people are using the system, and I'm so happy about that. I am not trying to hold on. Anatomy Trains is mine or something like that. One, I stole it from 99 other people. And then secondly, I didn't make it up so that I could hold on to it myself. It's great that people are using it in different ways.
Yeah.
Anatomytrains.com or anatomytrains.co.uk or something else for Australia. Those are our sites.
Great.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tom, so much. Do you have more?
No, I don't have any more. It was great.
Pleasure that it resolved.
And good luck recovering with your...
I really enjoyed this talk. Thanks a lot.
I'm
sorry
too. We did as well.
Glad to get it done.
Yeah,
amazing, Tom.
Good, Tom.
Take care.